Single dad shields stranger's child from vicious dog, but a billionaire witnesses it and does something that shocks everyone. Please rate my story from 0 to 10. Your feedback is crucial. And subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. Sweat dripped down the single dad's tanned face as he hauled another bag of cement under the scorching morning sun. At 30, his strong body, etched with the marks of hard labor, contrasted sharply with the simplicity of his worn clothes. The construction site bustled with activity in the upscale neighborhood, where imposing mansions stood like monuments to power and wealth. He'd arrived early, as always, leaving his 4-year-old son in the care of the kind neighbor who'd helped him since he became a single parent. His wife's unexpected departure 3 years prior had left deep scars on his heart, but he'd learned to live one day at a time, focusing solely on providing for his little boy and maintaining his dignity despite the hardships. That morning, a little girl, seemingly around 4 but appearing even younger due to her extreme frailty, was playing on the construction site. Her blonde hair was matted with dirt, and her torn clothes spoke of neglect. She ran between the tools scattered on the ground, while her mother, a weary-looking woman, chatted animatedly with other workers, oblivious to the dangers surrounding her child. From atop her imposing mansion, the 30-year-old unmarried billionaire watched the scene through gold-plated binoculars. Her black hair cascaded like silk over her shoulders, draped in a satin robe, and her green eyes sparkled with curiosity. Heir to a family empire built through generations of shrewd investments on Wall Street, she'd amassed a considerable fortune, including holdings in Bitcoin and a net worth in dollars that seemed limitless. Loneliness, however, was her constant companion in that house, filled with luxury but devoid of affection. Past relationships had left painful marks, causing her to erect emotional walls that few could penetrate. Observing the simple lives of ordinary people had become a morning ritual, a way to connect with a world that her wealth prevented her from experiencing. The ferocious bark echoed through the air as a large dog escaped from one of the neighboring properties. The animal, eyes bloodshot with rage and mouth foaming, ran straight toward the defenseless girl. The horrified screams of the workers mingled with the panic that gripped the site. Without a second's hesitation, the single dad dropped his tools and sprinted toward the child. His taut muscles clenched as he threw himself between the animal and the girl, taking a deep bite on his right arm. Blood gushed through his torn shirt as he cried out in pain, but his strong arms enveloped the little one, shielding her from harm. Chaos erupted. Other workers rushed to drive the dog away, while the girl's mother finally realized what had happened and ran desperately toward her daughter. The courageous man fell to his knees, still clutching the child, who cried, frightened but completely unharmed. From her gold-plated binoculars, the billionaire had witnessed the entire scene. Something in her chest constricted in a way she hadn't felt in years. The reckless courage of that stranger, the way he hadn't hesitated to sacrifice himself for a child he didn't even know, touched a part of her soul that she believed was dead. Without thinking twice, she descended the marble staircase of her mansion, crossed the perfectly manicured lawns, and walked to the main gate. Her bare feet on the hot asphalt drew the attention of everyone on the site, who stopped to watch the stunning woman approach the injured man. The girl's mother sobbed her gratitude as she embraced her daughter, and the workers tried to staunch the bleeding from the hero's arm. When the billionaire knelt beside him, her green eyes met his for the first time. There was something in that masculine gaze that she'd never seen before, a purity, a genuine kindness that contrasted completely with the self-serving men who frequented her social circle. She pulled out her diamond-encrusted cell phone and called the city's best private hospital, demanding that an ambulance arrive immediately. Her firm, authoritative voice made everyone around realize that she was someone important. While they awaited the paramedics, she held the injured man's free hand, feeling an inexplicable connection to this stranger. When the ambulance arrived, she announced that she would pay all medical costs and accompanied the transport to the hospital. During the journey, she studied every detail of the masculine face contorted in pain. There was a rugged beauty in those features, etched by the sun and hard work, an honesty that she'd never found in the refined halls she frequented. At the hospital, while he received the necessary stitches, she spoke with the doctors about the best possible treatment. Her limitless credit card covered all procedures, medications, and special care. When he awoke from the local anesthetic, he found her sitting in the chair next to the gurney, still wearing the satin robe that betrayed her hasty departure from home. The gratitude in his brown eyes made her feel something that her money had never bought: purpose. For the first time in years, she felt truly useful, not just a spoiled heiress living off the income from family investments and dividends. At that moment, an idea began to form in her mind, a decision that would change both their lives forever. 3 days later, the single dad returned to the construction site with his arm still bandaged, but determined not to miss a day of work. Each missed day meant less money to support his son, and he couldn't afford to be absent for long. The throbbing pain in his injured arm was a constant reminder of that morning that had changed something within him, though he didn't exactly know what. The other workers greeted him as a hero, recounting the story of his courage to anyone who would listen. But he just smiled shyly and went back to work, carrying bags of cement with his good hand and ignoring the pangs of pain that shot through his injured body. It was then that a gleaming imported car pulled up to the entrance of the construction site. The silent engine contrasted with the noise of the heavy machinery, and all heads turned to watch who would emerge from such a luxurious vehicle in that rough workplace. The billionaire emerged from the driver's seat, wearing a navy blue dress that cost more than he earned in 6 months. She walked purposefully among the rubble and tools, her high heels studded with sparkling crystals glittering under the sun. Each step demonstrated confidence and authority, but when her eyes met his, there was a softness that few had ever witnessed. The workers stopped working to watch this unusual scene, a clearly powerful woman looking for a simple construction worker. She approached him with a smile that made her green eyes shine like precious emeralds. She asked about his arm, about how he was feeling, and he answered with the honest simplicity that had won her over at that first encounter. There was something in her genuine concern that confused him. Never had such a refined woman shown real interest in his well-being. Then she made the offer that no one expected. She said she needed a personal driver, someone she could trust completely, and that she'd been impressed by his courage and character. She offered a salary that was 3 times higher than what he earned on the construction site, plus benefits that included health insurance for him and his son, a food allowance, and even a small house on her property for them to live in. The other workers' jaws dropped. It was an opportunity that would completely change his life, but he hesitated. There was something in her eyes that made him question whether that generous offer came only from gratitude or if there were deeper motives that he couldn't understand. She explained that her previous driver had recently retired and that she really needed someone reliable for her business meetings, trips to oversee her investments, and manage part of her estate, which included properties scattered throughout the city. She mentioned discreetly that her profits came mainly from investments on Wall Street, and that a significant portion of her wealth was invested in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. He looked at his own calloused hands, at his cement-stained clothes, and wondered if he was really prepared to enter a world so different from his own. But he thought of his 4-year-old son, the difficulties they faced living in a dangerous neighborhood, the nights he slept worried about whether he could pay all the bills for the month. He accepted the offer, but asked for a week to organize his departure from the construction site and find someone to take care of his son during work hours. She agreed immediately and said he could bring the boy to see the property before they moved in, ensuring that the child felt comfortable with the change. A week later, father and son crossed the imposing gates of the mansion for the first time as new residents. The 4-year-old boy ran through the perfectly manicured gardens, marveling at so much space and beauty. The small house in the back was simple but comfortable, with 2 bedrooms, an equipped kitchen, and a small living room that overlooked a green area where the child could play safely. On his first day of work, she took him to see the garage, where an impressive collection of imported cars was lined up like gleaming soldiers. She explained the routes he should memorize, the times of the most important meetings, and some peculiarities about her temperament in business. She could be ruthless with dishonest partners, but she was generous with loyal employees. During the first few weeks, he discovered that behind the cold and calculating facade in business existed a deeply lonely woman. On long trips to meetings in other cities, she sometimes sighed looking out the window, and he perceived a hidden sadness that she tried to mask with expensive perfumes and sparkling jewelry. She, in turn, admired the way he spoke of his son with so much affection, how his eyes lit up when he received a call from the school about the boy's progress, and how he always saved part of his salary for small luxuries that he could provide to the child. A special ice cream, a new toy, better clothes. The conversations during the trips began to become more intimate. She told about past relationships that had hurt her deeply, men who approached her only interested in her fortune. He spoke about the unexpected departure of his wife, about how he woke up one morning and found only a letter saying that she needed to leave without further explanation. The tension between them grew almost imperceptibly. A prolonged look in the rear-view mirror, a whispered thank you when he opened the car door for her, the way she worried when he arrived a few minutes late, the way he smiled when she praised his son's manners. But it was during a business trip to a distant city that something changed definitively between them. An unexpected storm forced them to stop at a roadside hotel in the middle of the night. She booked 2 rooms, but when they arrived at the location, there was only one available due to a problem in the reservation system. He offered to sleep in the car, but she insisted that they stay in the same room. There were 2 beds, and they were civilized adults. During that night, they talked late into the night about dreams, fears, and regrets. It was the first time he saw her without the armor of perfect makeup and designer clothes, wearing only a simple nightgown, with her hair down and her face washed. She looked younger, more vulnerable, more human, and when a tear escaped her eyes as she spoke about the loneliness that consumed her, he instinctively rose to comfort her. The embrace that began as comfort turned into something more intense, more dangerous. They separated before the situation got out of control, but both knew that something irreversible had happened that night. The next day, they returned home in silence, each lost in thoughts about what this meant for their futures. The days following that night at the hotel were marked by an almost unbearable tension. She avoided looking directly at him during the trips, keeping conversations strictly professional, but he noticed how her hands trembled slightly when he opened the car door for her. Her perfume seemed more intense, and he found himself breathing more deeply when she passed nearby. For 3 weeks, they danced this dangerous dance of proximity and distancing. She made excuses not to need his services on certain days, but then called asking him to pick her up for appointments that could easily be resolved by telephone. He, in turn, began to arrive a few minutes earlier at work, just to have the chance to see her having coffee on the mansion's balcony. It was her 4-year-old son who broke the invisible barrier they had built. The boy had become accustomed to playing in the gardens after school, and on a particularly hot afternoon, she found him crying near the pool. He had fallen and scraped his knee, and instinctively ran to her for comfort. She picked him up in her arms, with a tenderness that surprised both of them, cleaned the wound carefully, and put on a colorful bandage that made the boy smile. When the father arrived from work and found the two talking animatedly about dinosaurs in the living room, something in his heart warmed in a way he hadn't felt in years. That night, after the boy fell asleep, she invited him to dinner at the main house. The table was set with elegant simplicity, and she had personally prepared a home-cooked meal, something she hadn't done in years. During dinner, they talked about the boy's childhood, the fears of being a single parent, how difficult it was to balance work and raising a child alone. She revealed that she had always wanted children, but her previous relationships had never progressed to that point. The men who approached her were more interested in her net worth than in building a family. She spoke about how her fortune, accumulated through years of smart investments in stocks and funds, had become a barrier to genuine relationships. He confessed that he sometimes felt inadequate in her world of luxury and sophistication, but that he had never felt as comfortable with someone as he felt with her. He said that despite all her wealth and power, she was the most real person he had ever met. The conversation stretched late into the night, and when she walked him to the door, they both knew they had crossed an invisible line. The kiss happened naturally, soft at first, then more intense, charged with months of accumulated tension. When they broke apart, both were breathless and aware that there was no turning back. But the happiness was short-lived. The next morning, as she reviewed some old documents in her office, she found papers that left her completely shaken. They were reports from an old audit regarding irregularities in a construction project that her company had financed years before. The address mentioned in the documents was exactly where his wife had worked as an architect before leaving town. Her hands trembling, she read every line of the report. The construction project had presented serious structural problems due to low-quality materials approved through internal corruption. Several families had lost their savings, and some professionals involved in the project had suffered nervous breakdowns due to the pressure and legal threats that followed. His wife's name was on the list of professionals affected by the scandal. She had been one of the architects responsible for the project and, according to the documents, had tried to report the irregularities months before the collapse, but was silenced by corrupt executives within the billionaire's own company. The discovery was devastating. She realized that indirectly her company had been responsible for the suffering that led his wife to leave town, abandoning her husband and son. Guilt consumed her completely, making her question whether fate had conspired to bring them together as a cruel twist of irony. That same afternoon, she received an unexpected visit that further complicated the situation. Her ex-husband, a powerful businessman whom she had betrayed years before, arrived at the mansion unannounced. He had found out about her relationship with the driver through high society gossip and was determined to win her back. The powerful man offered to completely forgive the past and restart their marriage, claiming that she was just going through a rebellious phase by getting involved with someone so beneath her social class. He mentioned discreetly that he possessed compromising information about tax irregularities in some of her investments, suggesting that it would be better for everyone if she reconsidered her recent choices. When the single dad returned from work that night, he found the main house with all the lights off. She had locked all the doors and didn't answer his insistent knocking. Through the window glass, he could see her sitting on the living room sofa, holding some papers in her hands and crying silently. For 3 days, she refused to leave the house or speak to him. She cancelled all business meetings, ignored calls from the managers of her funds and investments, and remained locked away with her internal demons. The 4-year-old boy was confused by the sudden absence of the woman who had become so important in his life, constantly asking his father why she didn't come to play with him anymore. On the 4th day, she finally opened the door, but her face was etched with pain and the decision she had made. In a firm but broken voice, she said that she could no longer maintain that relationship. She claimed that they had made a mistake, that their lives were too different, and that it would be better for everyone if he looked for another job. He tried to argue, asked what had happened to change her so drastically, but she remained unmoved. She said that she had already arranged for 3 months' salary in advance so that he would have time to reorganize, and that they could remain in the small house in the back until they found another place to live. The pain in her eyes was evident, but she didn't explain the true reasons for her decision. He left that conversation completely lost, not understanding how something so beautiful had turned into rejection so quickly. That night, as he packed his few belongings, he looked out the window and saw her crying on the mansion's balcony, holding a glass of wine that she wasn't drinking, and looking at the stars as if they could give answers to the chaos into which their lives had turned. 2 months had passed since the painful separation, and both were trying to rebuild their lives separately. He'd gotten a job at an auto repair shop on the other side of town, earning less than half of what he received as a driver, but maintaining his dignity away from the complications of that impossible love. The 4-year-old boy constantly asked about the beautiful woman, and he always made up vague excuses so as not to have to explain the pain he felt. She, in turn, had gone back to focusing completely on business, expanding her investments in new cryptocurrencies and diversifying her wealth in international holdings. But the nights were long and lonely, and she found herself driving to the neighborhood where they lived, just to see them from afar when the father picked up his son from school. It was during one of those melancholic afternoons that she witnessed a scene that would change everything again. An elegant woman with brown hair and a refined appearance approached the father and son at the school exit. The child ran to hug her with joy, and she observed from a distance with a broken heart, thinking that he had found someone new. But something in the unknown woman's posture intrigued her. There was a familiarity in the way she interacted with the boy, as if she had known him for a long time. Intrigued and consumed by jealousy, she decided to discreetly investigate who this person was, who seemed to have won the child's heart so easily. The discovery she made through a private investigator left her completely shocked. The elegant woman was the wife who had left 3 years before, and she hadn't abandoned her family by choice. Medical documents revealed that she had discovered a benign but worrisome brain tumor, which was affecting her judgment and causing episodes of mental confusion. Terrified by the possibility of becoming a burden to her husband and young son, she had decided to secretly leave to be treated at a specialized clinic in another city. She left an explanatory letter with the family lawyer, with instructions to deliver it only after her complete recovery or if something serious happened to her. The treatment had been long and painful, involving surgery and months of rehabilitation. Throughout this time, she watched her family from afar through social networks and mutual acquaintances, always afraid to return and discover that she had been replaced. When she finally recovered completely, she returned to the city, but upon seeing her ex-husband apparently adapted to his new life, she decided to keep her distance. It was only when she learned through neighbors that he had lost his job as a driver and was experiencing financial difficulties that she decided to approach him again. The reunion between the former couple was tense and charged with conflicting emotions. He was furious for having been abandoned without explanation, but relieved to know that she was alive and well. During long, painful conversations, they realized that the love between them had transformed into fraternal affection during the separation. She had changed deeply during the treatment, becoming more independent and decided about her own desires. He, in turn, had discovered a different love, more mature and profound, for another person. The most surprising revelation came when she told about the true reason for her original departure. Before discovering the illness, she had found compromising documents about irregularities in the construction project where she worked. Corrupt executives from the funding company had subtly threatened her, hinting that something could happen to her family if she continued asking inconvenient questions. Fear and psychological pressure, combined with the first symptoms of the disease that had not yet been diagnosed, caused her to panic and flee. She revealed that the company responsible for the threats belonged to the same business group as the billionaire, but that she later discovered that the heiress herself had fired all the executives involved in the scandal as soon as she took total control of the business. This revelation made him finally understand the strange behavior of the woman he loved. She had discovered the connection between her company and the suffering of his family, and guilt was consuming her, even though she knew she had no personal responsibility for the acts of her predecessors. Determined to clarify everything, he left his son in the care of his ex-wife and drove to the mansion. He found the gates closed and several suitcases at the entrance. Through the employees, he discovered that she had decided to leave to personally manage a branch of the company in another state, claiming that she needed changes in her life. Desperate, he ran to the airport, arriving only a few minutes before boarding. He found her in the waiting room, thinner and paler, wearing a dark outfit that highlighted her sadness. When she saw him, her eyes filled with tears, but she tried to look away. He knelt before her, right there in the middle of the crowded airport, and declared his love aloud. He said that the past didn't matter, nor the social differences or the obstacles they might face. He told about the conversation with his ex-wife, about how they had discovered the truth about her departure, and how this proved that fate had conspired to bring them together in a positive, not cruel way. People around stopped to watch that romantic scene, some recording with their cell phones, others applauding when she finally stood up and kissed him passionately. Between tears and whispered declarations, they realized that they had wasted precious months because of misunderstandings and unfounded fears. Their relationship still faced resistance from her traditionalist family and the prejudiced looks of high society. But they had learned that true love is worth any sacrifice. She used part of her fortune to create a support fund for families affected by irregularities in civil construction, transforming her guilt into positive action. 6 months later, they were married in an intimate ceremony in the gardens of the mansion. His ex-wife attended with her new partner, a doctor whom she had met during treatment, blessing the union and demonstrating that it is possible to overcome the past when there is maturity and true love. The girl he had saved on the construction site was the flower girl, symbolizing that sometimes the simplest acts of kindness can change the course of entire lives. The 4-year-old boy finally had the complete family he had always wanted, gaining not only a new mother, but also the emotional stability he so needed. They built a life where his simple values blended harmoniously with her sophistication. She learned to find joy in the little things: a family dinner, an afternoon playing in the garden, a movie watched on the sofa. He discovered that true wealth is not measured in dollars or investments, but in the quality of relationships and in the ability to make a difference in people's lives. Together, they proved that love can overcome any social barrier, any class difference, and that sometimes the greatest fortunes are built not in banks or investments, but in the hearts of those we choose to love and protect.